Hey guys, welcome back. So I have some more hacks and hints, tips, tricks, etc. for you. This is also, I guess, part 479 of how obnoxious can my dogs be while I'm trying to film. Currently River is chewing on a bone behind me, so hopefully it's not too distracting. But sometimes it is what it is. Okay, so I want to just give you some things to think about. Got some stuff gathered here. Things that maybe you don't know about or never thought about or didn't see the use for. Don't know, but I just wanted to work on some stuff here with you. So the first thing I want to bring up is coloring books. And you may think, hey, this is kind of crazy, but a lot of these coloring books are really good for shapes and for outlines of certain things. I bought this one specifically because I wanted some of the shapes for like fish and the shells, the coral, that kind of thing. So this is a good way for me to be able to do that. I can use these to trace. And when you trace, you actually do begin to create muscle memory so that you are teaching yourself to draw in a lot of ways. And it helps kind of just learn the way your hand needs to move for some of these. So a lot of times these coloring books, like I said, they're just great to pick up for the shapes, for the things that you might not necessarily want to paint, but you want the outline of. So something to consider if you're learning or you're like me and you don't draw as well as some people. I do not draw well at all. So again, you know, a coloring book can definitely help you out in some of those areas. Something else I want to mention is that you can make your own journals. Obviously, they're not going to have like a hard cover on them. You can do that, but that's a whole different ball game. But if you've got paper, it can be big paper, little paper. This is actually the Stonehenge paper that I really don't like. But you poke some holes in it. I used embroidery floss. You can get some bookbinding materials. Because this was thick, I actually used a drill to do my points. You could use an awl for that. And then make sure that when you weave your thread through, you're giving yourself enough to tie off, but that you're catching it in multiple spots. There are some videos out there for that were very, very helpful. But it's nice. I have a book of water scenes that I was working through, and I kind of decided I wanted to try it, to go through it page by page kind of thing. And as I've said before, I really don't like the Stonehenge paper. I kind of wish I'd started this on a different paper, but you can make these, and these are really good to do for like travel and stuff, because you can make them as big as you want, tie them together, and then, you know, toss them in a bag. They don't have a hard cover to get in the way or take up extra space or stuff like that. So not a bad option, especially if you've got like a lot of paper that you just want to use up. Make your own journal and be able to do that. The other thing that you can also do, and people mention this a lot, if you find a paper you like you say you do like the Arches paper, a lot of times buying big sheets of that paper is a lot more cost effective, and you can cut it up into sizes that you want. I know there's people out there who have done the breakdown on those big sheets and the sizing and what you get out of each sheet kind of thing. But you can do that, and that can actually save you money in a lot of cases if you have the ability to cut up those bigger sheets. So just an option for you if you want to, like I said, do a journal or try to find some easier options on paper. That's always something to think about. If you're like me, you've always got a bunch of test strips floating around that I'll do notes and stuff on the back of them, but I like to keep these around. I don't usually throw them away because sometimes I'll do stuff with them. Like in this case, I made some labels for my filing cabinet, my miscellaneous office supplies, So they end up being actually really cute. I kind of did it just because it was what I had handy, and then I ended up really liking it. So just think about, you know, sometimes you can actually put some of these to use that you may think they're trash, but they're not. I also want to talk about some masking fluid. So masking fluid comes in lots of shapes and forms. A lot of times, I mean, you can get it in pens, you can get it in bottles, you can get it in squeezy bottles. So it comes in a lot of different, I guess, containers. Some of them will be colored. I have some that is kind of a blue color. I actually like that because it's easier to tell when it's dry as opposed to these kind of beigey color that it's sometimes harder to tell. But if you want to create white space and you don't think you can paint around something and keep that, or maybe you want something that has distinct lines, that kind of thing, you can use masking fluid and it will help with that. So some of them have the really tiny tips on them, needle tips, to make it a little easier to do fine work with it. Some of them do not. I have also used some silicone tips brushes to lay down the masking fluid. There are some people out there who show how to kind of protect your brushes if you want to use a regular brush. I know one person says to use soapy water. One person kind of rubs theirs in some Castile soap and pats it and then uses it. In the end, masking fluid is going to ruin brushes, but sometimes you can give them a little more protection and stave that off a little longer. So something else that's kind of handy to have are sponges. You could also use a kitchen sponge, but different kinds of sponges can be really fun, really interesting to have around. They're great for leaves on trees, for maybe laying down some random flowers, I like them sometimes to make white caps on waves. They're good to lift out for things like clouds, that kind of thing. So the different kinds of sponges will give you a little different pattern. So the sponges are definitely useful to have on hand. You can see I didn't rinse mine off good enough and I got some paint stuck in there. They can be torn apart too if you need little ones. So they're just handy to have. I like having some different sponges around. I know that some people have used, like I said, a kitchen sponge and cut it up. Hey, whatever works. You know me. I don't knock stuff. So just something that you might want to think about getting when you have a chance. You can usually get little packages of these at a craft store or an art supply store for a reasonable price. They're usually not terribly expensive. These are all natural brushes, or excuse me, all natural sponges. So they tend to run a little more expensive, but I mean, I want to say I paid $5-6 for like 4 of them. I don't even know it was these four in particular, but definitely fun to have, and you can do some different effects with them. I recently bought a micro eraser. Very nice to have when you're trying to get in there on some tight spaces and clean it up your lines a little bit. I didn't even know they made these and happened to see one on a video and was like, oh, I think I want one of those. So I just found it on Amazon. So I've used it a few times, works great, really like having it. It's definitely come in handy. If you want to paint white, all of us know that watercolor white does not hold. So there are some options. You can do gouache, which acts a little more like an acrylic paint. And this stuff, the P.H. Martin's Bleed Proof White, if you want white and you don't want that stuff going anywhere, you don't want anything showing behind it, this bleed proof works really, really well. I usually water it down just a hair. It is a bit thick. This stuff, though, I have found does not necessarily re-wet. So if you put some in your palette and you want to come back and re-wet it, I don't feel like it ever quite gets the same coverage when you do that. But this little bottle will last a while. I mean, I've had it for a minute and I've barely put a dent in it. So it's, like I said, if you want something that's white, not going to go anywhere, this is your guy. The white gouache, depending on your type of gouache, there are two different kinds. There's kind of a watercolor, I think, gouache, and an acrylic gouache. Acrylic is not going to re-wet, and I think this bleed-proof white is probably acrylic. I don't know that as fact, but that's my guess. The watercolor gouache will re-wet. So I have found personally the solid, can't mistake it white. You want bleed proof if you want something a little less harsh, something that you might be able to see through just a little bit or not be quite as sharp on the edges, that kind of thing. Then your gouache is kind of what you want to go for. So I keep a tube of that around. I keep the bleed proof and go from there. I also want to talk to you a bit about swatch cards. So I decided I wanted to do swatch cards for all my paints a while back. They're really, really useful for a lot of reasons. So you can see this is actually a failed swatch card over here. I think I just had too much paint, and so I didn't get the fade that I wanted. So ideally you want to do a fade on this. You want to do it pretty thick and then fade it down because you want to see how the color graduates. I added some salt on mine because I wanted to see what the salt reaction was. And on the back of these, I put on here, D is for Daniel Smith, the Schminky. So I've got the brand, I've got the name, I've got which way they lean, in this case warm or cool. I've got my pigment information. So if I want to be like, is this one gonna have an issue mixing, or it's not gonna mix well with one thing or another, my pigment information is right here. And that helps on down the line. Excuse me. I've got my light fast information, if it's staining, or the tinting strength on it, if it's granulating, if it's transparent, semi-transparent, or opaque. In this case, both of these are toxic because of something that's in the ingredients. In this case, I think it's the chromium, if I remember correctly. And I also write down if it has a salt reaction and kind of if it's a good reaction, if it's just a minimal reaction. In this case, you can see it's a pretty good reaction, especially in the wetter areas. And there's probably a better word for this. I want to know how well what I call this travels. So when you put a drop in the water, I want to know how fast and how far it bleeds out, I guess. And so that tells me, for instance, Thalos, the Thalo Blue, you put a drop of that down, it's going to take over everything. So that's helpful because you want to know, if I put this in, is it going to go everywhere? Do I need to have a little more control? That kind of thing. So I highly recommend doing swatch cards for your stuff. I think it helps give you a better feel for your colors, how they're going to react, what they're going to look like. It gives you a chance to do stuff like salt reactions, and it also puts your information in one spot. So if you have questions about it, then it's all right here. And I also think that it helps you kind of learn your pigments a little bit. Like, if I remember correctly, I want to say PG7 is a phthalo green. Don't hold me to that, but I think. So like I said, it's a lot of good information. There's a lot of ways you can organize this. I won't get into that because there's so many other people who have covered that, but just kind of a nice way to get to know your paints, understand your paints, and see, some information about them that you might not pick up otherwise, or would be useful to know as you use them. I also want to talk about some soap here. So I clean my brushes every so often with this soap. It's just in the tub. I wet my brush down, I roll it through there, get it good and soapy. I've got a little mat that's got some nubs on it, run it across that, and use that to clean it out. No matter how well you rinse your brushes in your rinse water, sometimes you just can't get it all out. It's just that simple. So every so often I go through and I wash my brushes with this. Works really well. My brushes stay in good shape. I've not had any issues with that. There is also, I wish I still had the package. I don't. I apologize. It's from the same company as this. The package is very similar. It is a little different soap. You can see this one's green. This one actually smells kind of medicine-y, minty. I got watercolor, a lot of paint in the carpet at the rental house I was in thanks to the dogs. They got a hold of a tube of paint, chewed on it, got paint everywhere. Thank God it was a non-toxic paint. That's a whole other thing. But I tried to get it up, couldn't get it up, bought this, and this actually pulled it up quickly, easily, just completely. So really nice to have on hand. I haven't used this one to clean brushes, but like I said, it does help get paint out of other things. So not a bad item to have. Something else I want to talk about is when you are setting up a palette, which I'm about to be doing, and I may actually film this, I don't know. When you draw out a palette, I know I'm not the only one crazy enough to do that. If you change colors, you swap out colors, you decide, hey, you know, I've used this one up, I got a new red that I want to try or whatever. If you paint directly on your sheet, then you're going to have to redo this all over again. But if you do little swatches, and I'll, like, I don't know, probably glue them down or tape them down, and you put them on there, then you have the ability to swap these out as needed. So I ended up painting little swatches, and I bought a like a crafty hole punch. I don't know what else. Paper punch? Is that what you call it? I'm not even sure right now. Like a paper punch. This is, I want to say it's like 3/4 of an inch by 3/4 of an inch. And then that way you have the ability to swap all these out and around. And if you want to change them, or you decide, hey, I really want this color instead of that color, those kinds of things, it just makes it easier. So you only have to create this layout once. You can see here where I you know, wrote the names on them. I did little quickie swatches, and then I just punched them out. And that's how I ended up doing that. But it makes it a lot easier. And you can do this even on your little ones. Like if you've got a little, dropping stuff. So a little palette like this, there's no reason you can't do this for this too. Like I said, if I swap out one of these colors, I'm going to have to redo this whole thing now. But when you do it with the punches, and you can get different sizes of these, then you can easily swap them out when you change up. So just something to think about. I feel like it makes it a lot easier to do that. And because, you know, I'm trying to figure out my layout here, how I want to lay this down in the palette. This has gone through several iterations while I decide what colors I want to use. You know, do I want to add this color? Are these colors too similar? So I have already swapped these around 3 or 4 times trying to decide which ones I'm going to do. I didn't realize until I started setting it up that I didn't actually give myself enough spots. Whoopsie. So I will end up redoing this one. But it's just, it makes it a little easier when you're doing your little swatch sheet for your palettes. So just something to think about. Like I said, you can get these paper punches in a lot of different sizes. I ended up getting a set of them. I've got the square, the rectangle, and the round. So if you wanted to do like a color wheel, you could do your rectangle with that, or your triangle. Good gravy. So yeah, your triangle could set up a color wheel if you wanted to do that. But this just makes it easy, like I said, to swap them around and see how you want to do your setup, or how you want to change it out. If you've got something that you think, oh, hey, I really like this color, but then you find, hey, I don't use it much, I want to take it out, more power to you. But then you have the ability to just swap out your color on your little swatch sheet without having to do the whole thing over again. So hopefully some of these tips helped you out. You found them fun or considered something that you didn't know before or think about before. If so, awesome. I would love to hear that you found some of it useful. But anyway, just get out there and just paint.